So today I'm going to talk about analyzing qualitative data. Basically, the topics that I want to touch on are what does qualitative data assess, and we've talked about this before, things to consider in qualitative data analysis, sources of qualitative data, steps in analyzing, hands-on, and then we'll do a hands-on example. And then I have a resources slide. So, what does qualitative data assess? And again, we've talked about this before. Knowledge, skills, values, attitudes and perceptions, and departmental or program processes. So qualitative data can do a number of things depending on what your goal is. Okay. So some things to consider. And some apply to quantitative data as well. The quality of the data. So sometimes the data comes from the respondents, meaning a survey. So if it's an open-ended question, they'll type in their data. Sometimes if it's a focus group or interviews, there'll be a note taker or it'll be taped and transcribed. So what's the quality of that data? How reliable is it? How is it verbatim if somebody's transcribing or notes are being taken? And that relates to limitations in the data collection process. What are those limitations? And is there bias? You always have to watch for bias, not only in the data collection process, but also in the analysis, particularly with qualitative data. The level of analysis given the reporting requirements. So if you're doing a report, let's say you're doing a survey of residential learning community, of a particular residential learning community, and you want the results to go to the faculty person for that residential learning community. They might want more level of detail than, say, if it's going to, VP of Student Affairs. So you have to decide what's your level of analysis going to be based on the reporting, based on your audience for the reporting. And unlike quantitative data analysis, the qualitative is fluid, iterative. It's a fluid, iterative process. So you'll see when we talk a little bit further with the qualitative data, you'll look at it initially, you'll look at it again, you'll categorize it, you do some analysis. The more you can work with it and go back to it, the richer your analysis will be. And then, the analysis relies on the craft and style of the analyst. It really is up to who's looking at that qualitative data. What categories are they coming up with? What is their perspective? What's their bias? What are their abilities to analyze, categorize, and make sense of qualitative data? So the person doing the analysis should keep good notes of the process and oddities and anything that comes up during the process, because then you can always have those notes to go back on and say, oh yeah, this is where I decided to do this rather than this, or how to interpret that. And then to decide how many people will be involved. I'm involved in a lot of academic program reviews, so do alumni surveys as a part of that. And I'll do the analysis and then send it back to the department. But I know, for example, the Student Affairs just had to turn in their staff survey report, and there were committees. There were several people working on the qualitative data analysis. So, of course, the more people you have, it's good because you have more perspectives, but it's also more of a challenge because you're trying to do all that categorization work together. And then consider whether to use a software package. We don't, in assessment, in the Office of Assessment, we don't use software packages. I know there are some. I have it on the list of resources at the end. And some places, either program departments or faculty have some software packages, mostly NVivo. And again, I don't use it, but they're there to use. So those are things to consider. And then, of course, we've talked about this before too, sources of qualitative data. surveys, either self-efficacy, reporting on own achievement, satisfaction, attitudinal, and then focus groups, interviews, observations, blog posts, reflection papers, essays. There's a whole slew of ways you can get qualitative data. Okay, so the steps for analyzing qualitative data. First, you want to become familiar with the data. And again, if you were involved in the development of whatever instrument it is that you're collecting data for, then you're going to be more familiar already. Like if you were doing a focus group and you're collecting qualitative data that way, if you were involved in that, if you were a moderator or a note taker, you already have a sense of what the questions were, some of the participant reactions. Often in my case, departments will ask me, I have this survey data, could you put together a report for the qualitative, can you put together a report? And then, so I don't have that, I don't come in with any of that background, any of that expectation. I just look at the qualitative data and I'm hopefully a little bit more objective. But read through, in any case, you want to read through the comments, read through the essay, read through the notes. What's the general sense? You'll get a general sense for that first time through. Note any impressions, including any deviations that you don't expect or things that really stand out. So this is the first step in the iterative process. You're just going to give it a read through, get your impressions, see what you see. Then you want to focus that analysis either by question or topic or time or group. It depends on the context. So I typically am analyzing open-ended questions in a survey. Please make recommendations as to this, that, or the other thing. Please give us comments. What don't you like about this? So in that situation, I'm focusing the analysis by the particular question, which is typically done. But there may be a time. You may do a pre and post. So you can, I don't know if you have good examples of pre and post, but maybe for the RA training, if they come in when they first do their orientation, what do you expect the challenges are going to be? And then at the end, what were the challenges? So if you were doing a report comparing those, it would be based on time, the pre and post. Then the real heart of the work begins, where it's really the data reduction piece. How do you identify themes and categories? Because you have that qualitative data sitting out there. How do you make sense of it? What do you do with it? So there's two common ways to do it: content analysis, keywords or content, and then thematic analysis, where you're looking for those themes. And you can do thematic analysis two ways. You can either do preset themes. Now again, if let's say you're going back to the RA example. I'm really bad at making up examples on the fly, but let's say you're going back to the RA example and you're doing the exit interviews, which is the data that Shelley had given me to look at for this presentation. And you are hoping that the qualitative data is going to show that RAs feel that one of the most important things is to be a role model. So that would be a preset theme. Before you start grouping or categorizing the data, you would say, okay, one of my themes is going to be role model. So those are the preset themes. You're already looking for certain themes. I prefer to do an emerging themes method because I think there's less bias and I think you're more open to some other things that people are saying. So emerging themes, you look at the qualitative data and you make themes as you read through it. In doing the data reduction, there's different categorization techniques that are data display. And this is really your preference, what works for you. I'm going to show you what I do, which is in Excel. I use Excel because it's just easier, and I'll show you why I think it's easier. You can use a Word document or hard copy. Some people do that. They color code, they highlight. You can make piles. Oh, here are comments related to role modeling. Here are comments related to this, that, or the other thing. You can use codes or symbols, diagrams or flowcharts. It totally depends on, this is where that whole craft comes into play. This is really an art as well as a science. So the next step, after you identify the themes, is to identify those patterns and connections. And again, this gets back a little bit to the reporting piece of it. Are you looking for 3 main categories? Are you looking to hit the major points? What's your ultimate goal? So when you interpret the data, again, you're looking at the purpose. Why are you doing this? Why did you ask for data? What's the audience? And what's the style of reporting? And I have this when we do the hands-on example, but you know, for the Division of Student Affairs, there's an assessment report template. So this is what they want if you're doing a report for student affairs. And essentially, you do the department and some of the other pieces, but essentially what you're doing is a bulleted list of findings and then implications for those findings. So that's very different than, for example, a lot of the reports that I do for, let's say, an academic program review, where I'm really I'm doing a more in-depth reporting of the data. If you're including quotes, which I do in my work, there's an art to that too. You know, which quotes do you choose? So if I'm saying the sample theme, you know, I'm saying one of the emerging themes is that RAs should be a role model, or what is the purpose of an RA? And half the respondents said role model. What are those quotes? I want to show some direct quotes that support the analysis that I'm stating that that's a theme. So how do I choose those quotes? We definitely want to remove names. Anytime we put things in, we do a report here, we leave names out. So if the director was named by name, we say the director. If an RA was named by name, we say an RA. Remove all names. And then, is further inquiry warranted? So do the results lend themselves to you going forward with a focus group or another survey? So there's always that, you know, what came out of that data that's going to be valuable? Is it valuable the way it stands, or is there more that you can delve into? So those are the basic steps for the qualitative analysis. Any questions so far? Okay, so what I thought we'd do, Shelley gave me information from exit interview focus group for the RAs from the spring. I know she came back. To be the role of an RA. So this is the data. This is transcribed. So this was from an interview, a focus group interview. So I was not involved in that process, but I'm assuming somebody transcribed this from what was said.
Yes.
So this is just a copy of what I just handed out. And this is that Division of Student Affairs assessment report template, because we have the raw data. Ultimately, we're being told what format the report should be in. So in this case, we need to identify the department, what was being assessed, program or activity, the intended learning outcomes for the program itself, how does it relate to the student affairs, learning goals, and learning objectives, the number of participants, other relevant descriptors of the participants, and then a brief description of how the assessment was done. We always want to disclose how the assessment was done, when, where, how many people were involved. Were there any, particularly with qualitative data, were there any limitations or things that came up that might have affected the results?
So that would be a place that I would report that the facilitator and the note taker were actually the director and the associate director in the room with staff that work for us that may have an impact on what they were comfortable sharing and presenting, or it was assistant director and the director in a room that that could impact, because it's our department, and it could impact how much. I mean, they were pretty honest, but who knows if that may have held some people back from fully sharing, whereas if we had outside facilitators and the data truly was anonymous, because you say the word anonymous, but I saw you say it, you know what I mean? And so it's anonymous to everyone else. It's anonymous to all of you, but it's not to us, who are the two people in the room facilitating and note-taking.
That's right.
So
that's right. So like you said, the better scenario would have been to have non-related people, well, less biased people in the room, but that's exactly where you would disclose that, because you know it probably had some impact. And then the bulleted list of findings and implications. So in looking at this, okay. So in looking at this, what I do, I'm going to hand out, this is what I do in Excel, and this is why I like Excel. Is there enough? Did you get that first sheet? We did. Okay. So the reason I like Excel is that what I do is add column. So for example, the first comment, a positive role model to all the residents, be a resource and a mentor to the students. So that's where I added the first column, role model, I added the column mentor, and then I added the column resource. So those three, first note, the first line, let me go back to the raw data up here. Okay. So again, that first statement, a positive role model to all the residents, I add those first three columns and I put an X. Help yourself to food. So I add those three columns and I put an X in them, just like that is. Role model, resource, mentor. The next comment, be a link between students, a voice of the students, be a professional member of the community, you reach both sides, student look up to you, faculty depend on you. So in that case, I added professional member of the community, and initially I had added a link between the community and the students. Now, students look up to you, faculty depend on you. I clumped that under professional member of the community. Could I have put that in role model? Sure. And I may do that at the end. But as I'm going along, I'm trying to make as distinct categories as I can, although I do adjust. The next one, life-changing experience, college-changing experience. You can go from being a commuter to an RA, don't have any knowledge of RLH at all. It changed my perspective. This is more, this isn't really the answer to what you perceive an RA to be, but as a resident to an RA, it gives you more of a better understanding of how everything works, why policies are. So I added that as resource. Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't. In my mind, the one place where it fit was resource. Second, the next one, makes you a better person in general. Once you get the RA position, it mediates your transition from being a regular college student to being a professional. It gives you that balance. It marinates that process from being a student to being a professional. So I felt that that goes under that professional member of community. So I continued that way. And the reason I like Excel is I just do a count at the bottom and then a percent. Meaning in the first column, 4 people mentioned role model is the role of an RA, and that's 33% of the 12 total people who commented. So so if we talk about iterations, first I read the comments. Before I even did this, I just read through to get a sense, so I knew role model, community builder, training issues, mentor. I got a sense of some of the things. And then as I was doing this, now I can really look and say, oh wow, okay, so here are numbers, the way I categorized everything. The whole community building piece, that had the most responses. Now it's at this point that you really decide, this is the next iteration, it's at this point you really decide what categories are important. Can I combine categories? Should I make more detailed categories? So this is where you really tie it into what are you doing? What's your purpose? Who's your audience? And in this case, I probably would combine some of the categories, but I would have to see what that goal is. So basically, under bulleted list of findings, if I left it this way and didn't combine categories, I would say issues related to community building, there were 5 comments, which was 42% of the respondents. Role model, 4 comments, 33%. Resource, 4, 33. So then the implications, again, this I just threw out there because this is really where your expertise and whoever's writing the report and doing the analysis, you have to decide what the implications are for your department. Discussion and training regarding what community building is, because somebody mentioned there should be a discussion about, there's some discrepancy about what people feel community building is. Communication of expectation and training for role model, because clearly that's one of the things that people feel should be a role of the RA. And if the goal of Res Life is for that to be one of the roles for the RA, and if only 33% commented that that was the role, then that's an issue, and that's why I added communication of expectation and training. I made that assumption, just because I was thinking that might be an assumption, that you would want the RAs to be a role model. So, and then training and preparation to be a resource. So those in this reporting framework, those implications really depend on your expertise, how the qualitative data reflects on the learning goals and the objectives. So in that report, it doesn't really ask for comments, sample comments or anything like that. You could put them in. You could say, the bulleted list of findings, role model, for example, somebody said a positive role model to all residents, or you are a role model and people look up to you. So, your decision is, I don't know in terms of the Student Affairs Division, would they want that? Or do they just want it, bullets, implications? That's really something that you need to find out before you do your report. I did bring a report. It's not public, but I wanted to show you. I want to put it on the slide. Again, it's not public, but it's get away from the camera. Essentially, so what I would do in my report is have the question. It's a qualitative. This says, please use this space to make specific recommendations regarding student experience and curriculum. And this is for a specific academic department. And so I'll pass it around, you can look at it, but I have at the beginning a description that this was an open-ended item that asked respondents to make specific recommendations regarding student experience and the curriculum within this academic department. And I said of the 28 respondents, again, this was a survey that they did for their, current, this is actually a faculty survey. So of the 28 respondents, 28 faculty took the survey that had quantitative and qualitative questions. 17 provided comments, mostly centered around themes of blah, blah, blah. And then those themes, I have curricular issues. Of the 17 respondents, 71% commented on curricular issues. And then, so I describe at the top the top 2 or 3 things that came up, the top 2 or 3 themes or categories that came out of that, and then I give the sample comments. And then at the very end, I just have in the appendix the whole transcript of every comment. So that when they're reading the report, they don't have to read through all this. I mean, that's the whole point of qualitative data analysis, is we're summarizing it by theme, giving good quotes so that somebody who's reading it can say, oh yeah, all right. So they made this comment about curricular issues. The 200 and 300 level courses need to be redesigned because of whatever reasons they need to be redesigned. And here are some sample comments about that. So in one page, I've given them a helpful summary that's grouped according to emerging themes that came out. But they can always go to the end and look at the actual transcript. So when I do, one more thing, when I do the sample comments, when I pull out the examples of the relevant comments, I do.
Well, I was going to ask if that was common. So, like, under where it says, when you receive to be the role of an RA, where it says issues related to community building. So, out of those 5 comments, I could take one of those comments and insert it, like, underneath in, like, an indented bullet again that says, like, this is a sample comment from these. But then, is that comment to put the raw data? So, my supervisor always wants the raw data along with my summary report. So, yes. She wants kind of the executive summary. Right. But she is someone who likes to go through the raw data. So, I've always either given her access to results or attached it as kind of another document in the one assessment report, because I don't know if everybody wants that. But, so is that fairly common that you would make available the raw data as well?
Yes. It's good policy too, because again, it's so
it's my analysis,
analytic,
so
dependent.
Depending on what
and there may be you can't cover everything in your bulleted list of findings and implications. So whoever you're reporting to, or whatever the line, I think they should have access to all of the raw data because it gives them. They might find something in there that they have been looking for, and you had no idea, or
and not hiding anything, or there's not I'm giving them what I want them to see as opposed to letting them see everything, or there's no kind of hidden agenda.
That's right. And then when we do this, I also include this. If it's a survey, I include the survey instrument at the end. Mm-hmm. So, I'll pass this around, but you have to promise me you can't discuss it out of this room. So that, it's a faculty survey for one of the academic departments. So there's quantitative as well as qualitative. But Shelley, that's a great point. I think it's really important for them to have it. Now, sometimes the other thing about comments is that sometimes one person's comment will fit in a number of categories. So when you're taking the comments and putting it into a report, you can take a piece of the comment that's relevant. If somebody spoke about role models or addressed role models and being a resource, I may want to use that part about role models under the role model sample comments, but I don't have to include the whole thing. I guess the last piece is the software. Again, I've not used software analysis. Typically what they do, here are just some examples of software packages for qualitative analysis. Typically what they do is they look for themes and words, and that's all a program can do. The meaningful categorization really is up to us, the people. So I'm sure that well developed, they've become popular more recently. I know they're growing. They're more and more available resources. So, and there's also the training piece. I mean, you can buy a piece of software for the first time investment and training, and to see how it compares to your own analysis.
Is there a time that, so when we talked about in the data I got back for that first question, for example, that one didn't really answer the question. Is there a time that would be okay if you were like upfront about a reporting that you kind of like scrubbed the data in a sense? Like that didn't really address the question at hand, so it wasn't going to be helpful one way or the other, and I didn't want to categorize it as something that did better, that you just wouldn't report on it, but you would still try
wouldn't
to track
report on it because the report is essentially getting to the heart of the data that answers the question. And usually, like you said, so usually the format, the Division of Student Affairs format, that one page, that's really, it serves as an executive summary. And that's what they want it for, so that they're able to say, here's the one-page report on this program or this survey or this whatever. And so in this, like you'll see this report that I'm handing around, there's a one-page key findings, so that if the department chair wants to look at it or other faculty want to look at it, they can get a sense of the results from one page. If they want to delve further, that's great. You could mention it, I wouldn't bother. And in fact, in this categorization that I did, only one person mentioned training, although training is pretty important, so I would probably find a way to include that. Somebody did say building dependent. No, two people said building dependent. May or may not. One person mentioned caregiver. I don't know, those could be, it depends on what you feel that the role of RAs are, whether or not to include it. But typically I just include the ones with more frequency. Sometimes I'll mention at the top in the summary before I show the sample comments, one person commented on thus and such, if I feel that it's helpful. But, again, that's my analysis. Your analysis might be different. But yeah, I would, if somebody was off topic, I wouldn't bother to include it.
What were you talking about?
You're right. Did you read the question? Did you read the question? Some people, it's very interesting when you start looking at a lot of qualitative data. Some people like to repeat the same thing no matter what the question is. They just want to get their point across.
So I was thinking of this just in terms of focus groups,
yes.
But when you have open-ended questions, because we do that a lot, and I was always like, I'll just list this stuff, but this analysis is also helpful in that respect. Because do you have that, I don't know, in OSO, Matt? You all collect a lot of data, and sometimes you have the open-ended. Like, had you reported on it like this before, or was it different, or not, or just kind of wasting it?
I would say more would just maybe pull out a couple of themes, but I think we wouldn't. I think this makes more sense as a way to do it.
It's like a quick summary of it.
Yeah, more data.
It's even, I'll tell you what this does for me is when I go through, and again, everybody's style is really different, but for me, when I do it this way, when I get to the end, I know that, and I look at the numbers, they're not always what I think they are. Like I would have thought role model was mentioned more than 4 times, but it was only mentioned 4 times. So it's an illusion to me that there's less bias or less subjectivity in it. Oh, see, it's quantitative, it's objective. There's numbers at the bottom, but of course, I've made the determination as to what goes into those numbers. But it also provides me with backup. It's like I can show somebody. So having that as backup, I can go back and say, if somebody said to me, okay, here are the 12 comments, where did you get these numbers? I can say, okay, it's right there. That's how I determine. But I'll go back through, and make sure that that was my initial step through. I wanted to stop there. Really, the next step of doing super categories or figuring out what makes the most sense in terms of presenting those major themes, that's the next step to that. So
I would say I was on the realignment committee with Christina. So
yes.
As you were talking, I'm like, I did all of this.
Right.
And it's so much easier to interpret as someone who's like done it hands-on and we color coded the chart that looked like this, and we did all of those things you were saying up there, and it was just, we understood it. Like, you were just talking about it, and, you know, we were there from the beginning to the end, but it was so much easier to interpret the data, you know, from the focus groups, from the surveys, to the discussions. So I overall enjoyed the entire process, and I learned a lot from it. So coming here just kind of reinforced what we already did hands-on. So I guess I just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Let you guys know that it works and that it's great. You do get a lot out of it.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I met with her early on. And
I know, as you were talking, like, we did all of this. I knew she met with you, and I'm like, this is where we got this from.
Great. And some people like the color code, and I just find this more efficient. It's all in one place. Because if you separate the data too much, then when you go back, you lose the ability to do that iteration. You want the ability to look at it. It's great.
Mark or Kathy, do either of you use qualitative data in any way? Like, do you collect? I don't know if you do in yours.
No, although I've got a lot of things that come up
Yeah.
that sort of feel like it would happen.
Will this be helpful? Is this
I
make it
mean,
easier?
I
have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you could, from Qualtrics, if you use Qualtrics for the surveys, you can just download it into an Excel file. So,
And then just sort it.
right, and what I usually do, so I download all the data to one Excel file, and then I use sheets, different sheets for different questions. So I'm preserving that preserving the data the way it is, and then doing sheets for each of the questions. Excellent. Yeah, let me, if anybody wants help, glad to help out.
And then please, so I'm coordinating the brown bags for assessment for the spring as well. And so if anyone has a specific topic that they're looking for, or if you want to give us your data for examples, the only reason sheets get mine is because no one else has given us anything. So if you want any data or your survey results or assessment pieces that you have, to use as the example with the group, give me those, because I'm just going to keep giving her mine and let her do my work. So that's entirely up to you.
I only have questions and I didn't finish it, so if you
No,
want
that's
to help,
all
I can help
move it.
too.
No, that's okay. Or if you all want to practice, I can give you each of one of these questions to go through. But so I'm looking for a few topics, just so you know, in the spring right now we're looking at having one. Melanie Sullivan wants to present all the CERT data, so that will be later on in the semester. And then we're talking about a workshop that we'll provide lunch for, to be a focus group facilitator. We had talked about that one. A focus group facilitator and a focus group note taker. So that'll be like a 2-hour, but we're going to feed you lunch, answer, and all that kind of stuff. So, because a lot of people wanted to know how that could be helpful for them, and then we can switch out to do each other's focus groups, so we don't have the bias built in with, like, me running one for my own department. I can have Mark come in, who's less biased towards kind of the data and be able to facilitate that or whatever. So that's just 2, but we have more, so tell me what you need for assessment, and we can work with Joanna, get someone else in, so whatever.
Right, there's IR,
Yeah.
institutional research, right?
Yep. So any pieces that might help you, I know the assessment committee would like to know, so let us know.
And but one of the things you know, like you said, this is what the Division of Student Affairs asks for.
Thank so helpful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the focus group, I know, that's great. If we can build,
We'll bring some to your class.
if we can build moderators and the campus-wide, then we can have a database and people need to run a focus group.
To kind of eliminate that, and that's why I said, like, for us, it would be super helpful, because we're gonna need like 4 or 5 of y'all to commit to resolution, so just keep that in mind.
Exactly. So again, just please.